Okay, hello. One of the things working in the Web 3.0 lab, particularly with events recently in the Arab world, that a lot of actually Americans brought up who are politically active or organizers is how come Americans, they say, well, Americans invented the internet, which isn't really fully true. Well, let's grant America innovated, was one of the early innovators and adopters of the internet. How come they did this? And the Arabs were the ones that actually were able to seemingly make the most great political use of that. And I've been looking at this and actually getting in contact with a lot of Arabs and looking at the demographics and studies, and I think there's two things that are very important to keep in. One is purely demographic. There's a concept in the internet called the digital native. Digital native is somebody under 30 years of age who's grown up with the internet. Digital natives are particularly innovative in thinking about new ways of living with the internet, engaging in the internet. Okay, so you see, Facebook is started by digital natives, a whole brand of digital natives. A lot of these new .com companies are coming out of the digital natives. They're extremely innovative people. I mean, people my age who can keep up with the digital natives are actually somewhat rare. I find most of the people that I work with or deal with who are near my age don't really know that much what's going on the internet. They may have a few, but younger people all know much, much more. In the West, in America, particularly in Europe, that we haven't been having children at a very high rate, and we're actually short of these digital natives. We have a big bust of baby boomers who are getting older. We're getting older. The West is becoming an older society. We're actually short, particularly in Europe, we're actually short of digital natives. We don't have enough of these young people. So the thing is that in Egypt, there were more of these young people who were, as the protest developed, thinking about how to use the internet, how to integrate the internet, how to make the internet and the grid and the ambient grid, the grid all on time, an organizational tool. And they have innovated a lot of methods, social methods that have worked for them politically. The next thing I think I really say is that we, particularly Americans, extremely individualistic. If you go to see The Social Network, the movie, okay, it presents a myth. The myth it presents basically is that the whole story of Facebook is a struggle between some billionaires. And actually the users of Facebook, if they're even referenced, and there's only a few references to use of Facebook in that whole movie, and the references to use make it seem almost like an addiction or something destructive. And in the end, ultimately, the users are just treated as a number. I mean, a key event is when they turn to 1 million users. And there's almost this ideal that an aggregation of those many people becomes a senseless mass. Because in American culture particularly, but also in Europe, but in American culture, we can only think in terms of the individual. So Facebook is not 50 million users, it's Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg gets on the cover, not the users. I mean, even Time Magazine, it was able to make Man of the Year the computer, but it wasn't able to make the internet user. You know, it really isn't American to think in terms of groups or culture or communities. It's about individuals. America's incredibly individual focused, and that does make it very entrepreneurial. But in the case we're seeing here, in particularly in Egypt, in the Arab world, these digital natives who started this protest were more likely probably to think in terms of their community, their family, their group of friends, their nation, their greater responsibility. And when they took to the internet, they weren't just thinking, hey, this is a great place where I could tell people about how cool I am, which is really, frankly, what I see most Americans doing with their Twitter and their Facebook. Look at me, I'm so cool, right? The Arabs probably were thinking about, how can I communicate with my community? How can I develop my community? How can I strengthen my community? And they had a stronger community-based value, so the social networking tool may have actually had a deeper and stronger impact. Because I notice most of my American friends, if I go to their Facebook pages, you know, it's about like, hey, look at the photos of my house, look at the photos of my vacation, look at the photos, look at how great I'm doing, look at how rich I'm doing, look at all these cool things, look at these badges I've won, look at these meals I know how to cook, look at this beautiful apartment I have. And it's not as much pictures of, you know, whereas I notice that when I have contacts in, say, Turkey or the Arab world or the Asia, there's more pictures of the family. There's more pictures of the community. There's more pictures of people other than just the kids. Whereas basically all I see on my American friend site is the pictures of the kids if they have kids on Facebook. So this greater sense of community actually may have made them much more effective users of social networking technology like blogs, like Facebook, like Twitter, like emails, things like that. Now, I think one thing that Americans particularly need to think about is they've got a little smug that Silicon Valley is somehow the birthplace of internet technology. The thing is, though, these Arabs, once they've settled out their political situations, they're going to be looking for jobs, right? And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for them to open up and start companies that are compete for this social cloud on the internet. And the thing is right now they've got some really, really good PR, and they've got a very, very strong global reputation as being very effective users of social networking and the internet. And I see very likely that in the next few years there's going to be a number of companies coming out, particularly out of Egypt, that are going to be going for this social networking crowd. And I think young people in Europe and America are going to be very drawn to them because being Arab is going to be really cool online. And having experience with Tahrir Square or Bahrain or Tunisia is going to count for quite a lot in kudos and also in maturity. And that we're going to see more and more of America having social patterns globally exported into it from parts of the world that haven't trashed their social systems in the way the Americans have, unfortunately, since World War II. And this is really a good thing because the thing is the Americans destroyed their sense of community in suburbanization. They obliterated it. They created kind of a really pathetic, isolated sense of families with cars out in the middle of nowhere. And this is spread in much of the West. And the internet gives an opportunity for places that didn't suffer this devastating, intentional destruction of community to actually import concepts of community back into America. And I think this is going to be a really, really big benefit for both societies. I think it's going to be very hard for some Americans to accept cultural forms coming in, especially from the Arab world. But in the end, this is really what America's all about anyways. Immigrants coming in, bringing in new cultural practices that strengthen and reinforce the existing society. But it's going to happen, not just people immigrating in, but now ideals are going to be immigrating in and out of the United States. And that's the future. And we're going to see a lot of those ideals coming from the Arab world. Once again, I'm Robert Hooker. I'm at the Web 3.0 Lab. If you want to learn more about this, just type in web space 3.0 space lab, and we'll be right there. Cheers.